After Nicolas Maduro's dramatic and sudden fall from power through U.S. military intervention, America's longtime Cold War adversary Cuba finds itself left reeling desperately in the devastating aftermath of the precision Venezuela strike that shattered Havana's strategic calculations. Following this shocking abduction of Venezuela's socialist strongman by American Special Operations Forces, Cuba now seems squarely and ominously positioned very much in the crosshairs of the aggressively interventionist Trump administration's regional security doctrine. The perfectly timed strike deep inside Venezuela unfolds precisely as Cuba battles crippling nationwide blackouts, acute food shortages crippling daily life, and a catastrophically aging power grid on the verge of total systemic collapse under unsustainable demand. For decades stretching back to Fidel Castro's era, Cuba has critically relied on massive economic aid packages and subsidized oil shipments from its oil-rich ideological ally Venezuela to sustain basic economic survival and regime stability against U.S. sanctions. Currently gripped by the most severe and prolonged power outages in its modern history, the communist island nation desperately requires approximately 120,000 barrels of crude oil delivered daily just to meet its most minimal basic electricity generation needs for hospitals and water plants. Now those lifeline shipments are plummeting perilously toward absolute zero from Venezuela, which had emerged as Cuba's indispensable main petroleum supplier after Mexico reduced its emergency commitments under American pressure. Back in December 2025 alone, neighboring Mexico dispatched multiple emergency tanker shipments of fuel across the Gulf specifically to help a blacked-out Cuba barely manage and prevent a total nationwide grid collapse that threatened civil unrest. However, it remains entirely unclear whether cash-strapped Mexico will dare intervene with additional shipments this time around, especially as Washington signals it may dramatically expand its long-standing embargo to explicitly cover and prohibit Mexican oil exports destined for communist Cuba. If the situation continues, if the United States really occupies Venezuela, it will inevitably affect us greatly. It is no secret that Venezuela is one of our oil suppliers, and that affects us a lot, especially given the energy situation we are in now. That is coming. It is inevitable if the situation in Venezuela remains as Trump proposes.
There will always be blackouts because the thermoelectric plants here in Cuba are very old, and they need to be renovated little by little. Not because of Venezuela, because we have agreements with other countries. I don't know, I think we can get the oil we need from other countries.
For decades since Hugo Chavez first invited Havana's assistance, thousands of Cuban advisors, intelligence officers, and personal bodyguards have embedded themselves deeply within Nicolas Maduro's trusted inner circle, providing regime security and political control. Cuba's notorious Direction General de Inteligencia has maintained a pervasive and strong operational presence throughout Venezuela specifically dedicated to ruthlessly cracking down on domestic opposition forces, student movements, and potential coup plotters threatening Chavismo. National security experts and U.S. intelligence officials conservatively estimate there remain approximately 15,000 highly trained Cuban personnel actively dedicated to intelligence collection, counterintelligence operations, and repression missions embedded across Venezuelan territory. These Cuban operatives in Venezuela simultaneously provide extensive medical care to regime loyalists and civilian populations, with both intelligence support and healthcare supposedly reimbursed through preferential discounted oil delivery contracts that sustain Cuba's economy. The devastating U.S. military attack surgically targeting Venezuela's leadership appears to have already exacted a heavy and bloody cost for communist Cuba, precisely as President Trump publicly confirmed during post-operation briefings to press. Donald Trump said, and I quote, "You know, many Cubans lost their lives last night. They were protecting Maduro. That was not a good move." Unquote. The rattled Cuban government reluctantly revealed on December 5th that exactly 32 of its citizens, likely intelligence officers and bodyguards, were tragically killed during the furious U.S. Special Operations raid extracting Maduro from his Caracas stronghold.
That's very hard. We, the families, all the people of Cuba, and the whole world feel pain over these losses and for our Venezuelan brothers and sisters who have also fought hard and have always stood with us in our struggles and in our defense. And I would like this to calm down, to see if he, referring to US President Donald Trump, would stop threatening everything that doesn't belong to him.
This violent confrontation would appear to mark the first time in decades that the United States and its former Cold War foe Cuba have directly engaged in deadly combat operations since the ill-fated 1961 Bay of Pigs invasion debacle. Four hawkish regime change advocates deeply entrenched throughout the U.S. national security establishment, the now irresistible urge to finally eliminate and dismantle Cuba's entrenched communist dictatorship grows stronger by the day following Venezuela's collapse. Repeatedly invoking his bold new interpretation of the Monroe Doctrine asserting unchallenged U.S. hemispheric hegemony, President Donald Trump has issued increasingly explicit military threats targeting multiple adversarial nations throughout Latin America, specifically including Castro's Cuba.
One of the things that is happening, and I think you see it all the time, Howard, you've seen it, that Cuba is ready to fall.
Yes.
Cuba looks like it's ready to fall. I don't know if they're going to hold out. But Cuba now has no income. They got all of their income from Venezuela, from the Venezuelan oil. They're not getting any of it. And Cuba literally is ready to fall. And you have a lot of great Cuban Americans that are going to be very happy about this.
Did that play at all into your decision to capture Maduro?
Are you considering U.S. action in Cuba?
We're not. I think it's just going to fall. I don't think we need any action. It looks like it's going down. It's going down for the count. You ever watch a fight?
Yeah.
They go down for the count. And Cuba looks like it's going down. What do you think, Howard?
Cuba condemns and denounces these actions as an act of state terrorism, a criminal assault against our America, a zone of peace, a violation of the sovereignty of a nation that is a symbol of independence, dignity, and solidarity, and an unacceptable attack on international law. No, imperialists, this is not your backyard or disputed territory. We do not accept or recognize the Monroe Doctrine, nor kings, nor outdated emperors. The land of Bolivar is sacred, and an attack on its children is an attack on all the worthy children of our America. With Havana's decades-long strategic alliance with Caracas now dramatically crumbling into dust before its eyes, Cuba suddenly confronts potential isolation on a scale not witnessed since the Soviet Union's economic collapse severed Moscow's subsidies in 1991. An increasingly isolated, economically vulnerable, and militarily exposed Cuba could rapidly emerge as Washington's very next prime target in its sweeping campaign systematically dismantling anti-American regimes throughout the rest of the Western Hemisphere. As Washington's military threats continue to escalate in both frequency and specificity, President Trump aggressively seeks to consolidate maximum regional strategic leverage, positioning U.S. forces for potential decisive intervention against Havana's defiant communist holdouts.